Hello and welcome back, and that is right, this is another video where we talk about ways of changing and upgrading the software on your Terramaster NAS. And in today's video I'm going to show you how to set up your Terramaster NAS with UnRAID, UnRAID there. It's one of the NAS platforms that I've not really talked about here on the channel, and I intend to talk about it a lot more. Now, Terramaster has its own software inside, that is TOS 5. It's a great little software platform, recently updated, probably better than it's ever been, but I think it's kind of, you can't really argue with a lot of users are quite familiar with the likes of TrueNAS and UnRAID. They're kind of used to the free software that they've used in the past, but what they're looking for is to get the hardware in a kind of pre-configured, pre-ready form for a 24/7 highly efficient system, but they want to use that other software, the freeware or semi-freeware or lightly subscription-based software, utilizing hardware that's already been pre-built that has its own warranty and more on there. So in today's video I'm going to be showing you how to get UnRAID on this system, and we're going to need some different components here on the screen. And at the start of this video we're going to go out for some disclaimers on what you need to get. Then we're going to move into the software side where I'm going to show you the files that you need to download. Then I'm going to show you how to do the physical installation, and then finally the software installation. It's as straightforward as that. This is the fourth video I've done in this series looking at different software platforms, so I do strongly recommend checking those out if you want to experiment more. But for now, let's crack on. So this is the Terramaster F4223. It's a 2022 generation Terramaster. It's what I'm going to be using for this, but the majority of the steps in this installation can be applied to a large number of Terramaster NASs. Just make sure, one, that it's a NAS that can have its memory either started at 8 gig or scaled up to that and more, because you will need a decent chunk of memory. Second thing, make sure you go for a NAS that's got an Intel powered processor there. That is, I'm going for one here that's got an Intel N5105, but pretty much any NAS in the 2020 to 2022 generation should be absolutely fine. Avoid any ARM based processors though. Next up, make sure that you either have a Terramaster NAS that has an HDMI port there on the rear, or you can look online and find out that there's probably an HDMI port inside that I'll talk about later on in the video. Now, in terms of UnRAID, unlike a lot of my other installation videos, it's not really essential. It's more of a troubleshooting option, but I strongly recommend that you have at least to hand a keyboard and an available monitor that you can patch in via HDMI. Again, in the case of UnRAID, it's not essential because you can use other tools to find the NAS on the local area network, but because of the nature of how these systems boot and the BIOS being where it will let you know where the USB within this system is being booted from, a potential naming conventions, it might be that if you're not able to boot it due to a specific kernel of Terramaster, that you are going to need to interface with the system directly, again via with a keyboard and a visual output, again a monitor or a capture card like I'm going to be utilizing, and therefore go into the BIOS, and then from there, and I'll show you how later on, to go in and tell the system to boot from a specific USB, the one that's inside there. There's no good putting the USB on the external ports because of that BIOS pointing at different USBs in order to boot for the first time. The last thing you're going to need, other than a screwdriver, and as mentioned in my other videos, if you don't own a screwdriver in your home, then you should stop watching this because it's not made for you. What you're going to need is this. You're going to need a USB. Now, I recommend going for a 32 gig USB, not because the UnRAID installation file is particularly big, but you might want to try different OSs over time, and therefore having one that no higher than this, I should add as well. Don't go higher than 32 gig. They do get seen, but for some reason they don't seem to work. I think some people online have said 32 gig is kind of the limit there, presumably a FAT32 issue. But also, and I will show you later in the video, the USB I'm using, this little SanDisk module. The reason I recommend it is absolutely tiny, which is really, really important for this video because the USB port inside the Terramaster is very small indeed. You're not going to be able to get a full-size USB in there. So again, there'll be later in the video, I'll show you which one you need there. But that's really it. That's all the kit you need to get things up and running to install UnRAID on your NAS. So why don't we make our way over to my laptop where I'm going to show you the files you need to install. Let's go. Okay, so we've made our way over to the desktop of our PC and we're ready to go through the files that we're going to need to download for this installation. First and foremost, this is the F4423, the NAS we're using for today's UnRAID installation. And as you can see by digging down into the specifications, we're running an Intel Celeron-based processor there, a lovely little quad-core N5000 series. And although the system has 4 gig of memory, we're going to be adding a bunch more memory, and I'll go through that later on in the video. But carrying on, normally when I've done my other installation videos for Terramaster, changing the OS, I would recommend using Rufus because a lot of installation media and bootloaders arrive in ISO or IMG image form. That is a digital version of an optical disc that gets burnt back and forth. However, in the case of UnRAID, it is actually available as a bootloader on USB. All you need to do is download the USB creator tool, and with this tool you can point it at an available USB drive and it will prep and sharpen up that USB as a bootloader for the Terramaster or indeed any system to unpack and install UnRAID server there for you. So go ahead and click download for Windows or Mac depending on which version you're using. And again, there's no extra layers, there's no registration with regard to downloading it, but do bear in mind that you can download a trial for UnRAID, but you will need licensing and additional purchases to make the very most of UnRAID and all its bigger features and larger scale utilization. Next up, the USB that we are utilizing is that SanDisk that we talked about earlier on. Now that SanDisk, again, knocking around for about $8 to $9 for 32 gig USB, but bear in mind, it's going to get tempting to go for the larger drive, largely because the larger drive, for as little as $1.50, $2 more, depending on where you are in the world, you get twice as much storage. But you've got to resist that. But because of the way FAT32 is created, unless you're going to use a third-party FAT32 formatter, if you end up utilizing a larger disk than this, there's every possibility that it won't interact with the layout and hardware there inside the Terramaster. So if you're going to go for this installation, try to stick with that 32 gig and maybe try to forget the fact that you could have got another 32 gig for as little as $1.50. And again, links to all of this and the downloads are in the description. Finally, there is the installation of the memory modules there, which will allow you to upgrade the memory on this system, and that's what I'm going to be putting inside this system. And that's really it. So let's go through the creation of our USB media there. So first thing we need to do is get those links there off screen there. What we need to do is get our USB drive and pop it inside our machine there. This is a Windows installation, and if you are running a Mac setup, this will be very similar indeed, but with a few small changes. So we've installed that USB, and if we go into the downloads area here and we open up the UnRAID USB creator wizard and we get that opened up on screen, we may get a black screen flashing there just to let us know that it needs admin privileges very, very shortly, as you can see now. So again, I can go ahead and click yes, and that will allow us to proceed forward, and then we'll go ahead and choose the ones we want. So we want a stable version there. We can go ahead and select which version of UnRAID. I'm going to go for all of the defaults, and we can give the server a name. We're going to call this one TM UnRAID test, and then from there we can choose whether we want that dynamic IP, because this is setting up the kind of preset defaults of the server you're creating there. And most NASes, you would do this during the installation of their first-party software. With this, you are hardwiring these defaults, at least for the starting, on that USB that you're putting inside. As you can see, it's listed a drive there on screen, but it's listing it as uncompatible. And the reason for that is because that drive still has media on it. So what we need to do now is format this drive so it is available for use. So the first thing we need to do is go ahead into this. Now, there are multiple ways to go about this. If you choose, you can go into Computer Management, and then from Computer Management, go ahead and list the available disks. So from there, go into Storage, go into Disk Manager, and you'll see the USB there listed on screen. If we scroll down, we can see it's unallocated. We can enable it and create a volume if we choose. And from there, it may allow us to see the drive, and that becomes the F drive there on screen as it starts to enable and create that drive for available use within this system and an available target drive. From there, we can go back into the application we were running before. Once again, unload that USB creator for the second time. From there, we should be able to see the drive, and it will allow us to utilize it. If the drive persists in being incompatible or unusable in this state, there is a workaround, because some USB drives, due to the structure in the file system, sometimes can give you a little bit of trouble. So what you need to do is head into My Computer by going into there, find the drive that's already listed on there. Again, do use computer management to add it as mentioned earlier on, then right click, select the option Format, and then from there make sure you are formatting in FAT32, but also add the volume label UnRAID. It has to be in capitals there. Go ahead and then click Start, and it will format the drive into FAT32 automatically, but also add the drive label UnRAID. And then what we can do from there is go ahead and head back into the UnRAID page that we downloaded the USB creator, but this time scroll down and download the most recent version of the unraid.zip install. So as you can see, I've downloaded this here already. This will download it in the background over to a standard file there. As you can see, we've got that, and it'll be a zipped up file. And what we need to do is right click, we want to extract that, but we want to extract to a very precise location. What we want to do is head over back into that USB that we've just connected. So what we need to do is, we can see there's the UnRAID drive there, and you can see it's going to extract it directly into there. Click OK, and it will start extracting the UnRAID installation there, that .zip, into the UnRAID USB that we've created there. And then from there, what we can do is get that USB moved over into our Terramaster NAS over there. Now, there are other things you can do, such as changing the setting there. We go into the articles, you can learn a little bit more about EFI. Just before we go any further, I just remembered that I missed something out on the original recording of this that's quite important at this segment. Before you take the USB out of your PC or Mac system, although ideally, because I'm showing you this in PC, maybe stick with that, it's worth remembering to do a couple of small things. One, head into the USB that you've created. As you can see earlier on, when we extracted all of those files from the UnRAID zip into the USB that we named UnRAID, what you need to do is a couple of things. First and foremost, you need to find this .bat file, or a batch file known as make bootable. Right click and then head up to run as administrator. You might see a black screen, but for now click yes, and then from there it allows you to turn this USB drive into a bootable USB drive. Click the button, and there you go. It has now converted that USB into a boot USB. It's a small thing, but trust me, you need this in order for the system to be able to recognize it as a boot disk, both on the first and later utilization of UnRAID. The next thing you need to do, if you're running this on a Terramaster NAS system, is to head down to this folder that says EFI and rename it and remove the minus. You need this to run as an EFI drive, and those two things you have to make sure you do before you remove this USB in order for the successful boot and indeed continued reboot of UnRAID on the Terramaster. Okay, so the physical installation portion of this is actually relatively simple, but do bear in mind that the steps I'm going through now apply to this 4-bay, and although they're going to be very similar to other Terramasters out there, do bear in mind that if you are using a larger or smaller NAS, then chances are things may be ever so slightly different. So again, you may have to differ ever so slightly in places. I'll try and keep you aware. Now, a few things to bear in mind straight away. One, these seem obvious, but make sure you disconnect power from this system during this portion. Not only because you might fry yourself, which is highly unlikely, but you never know, but two, you may hurt the components inside. Secondly, make sure you've removed any LAN connections as well. That's more because you might trip yourself up or pull the system out of the wall, which would be a real pain in the bum. But probably more important than anything is to remove your storage media. I already touched on earlier on that when you do this installation, it is going to format these drives. So just bear in mind when installing a third-party software that all that data is going to be gone, but particularly during this element of the installation, to remove those drives, because jostling the system will harm it. You don't have to give too much heed to the order of drives, because they're going to get formatted anyway. And as you can see, for this installation, I'm going ahead with a couple of 4TB WD RAIDs. But that's really it. As you can see inside this system, it's very hollow. But unlike a lot of other NAS brands out there, the components we need to access are inside, so we're going to need to start removing some of these elements. In the case of this NAS, we're going to have to remove all of the screws on the rear there and perhaps one of the bottom ones, but again it will differ depending on the system you are using. Another thing I've highlighted in other videos before is Terramaster actually supply a screwdriver with their system. Something, again, you don't really see many other brands doing, and that screwdriver, I've got to say, and I've mentioned it in other videos, is bloody good. It's a magnetic screwdriver that's included, so if you could find a screwdriver, good for you, but I would definitely recommend going for the one that they include with the system. It's a silly point, but still nonetheless very useful indeed. So we've got 3 of the screws. Let's get those out. So we've got one there. Get that out there. Again, I don't recommend battering your system like I am doing here. I'm merely doing that for the sake of brevity and getting the screw out as quick as I can. We'll get those other 2. And what we're going to do, or other 3 even, is we're going to slide the inside of this system out gingerly so we can access the internals. Now, for my installation, I am going to be upgrading the memory on this. You may not need to do that, but do bear that in mind that while you've got this open, now's a good time to upgrade that memory as well. What we're doing right now more than anything is replacing that USB. I do not recommend formatting that USB and overwriting it with the OS that you're choosing to use. That would be very, very damaging for the system, and overall you're then not going to be able to revert back to Terramaster if you need to. So again, do not format the USB that's inside. You'll only be harming yourself later. So there's our screws, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6. Pop that one with the others, then move that over there. So from here we're able to remove the rear of the system. Now there's a power cable that connects the fans at the top, but that installation inside there, that entire internal cage system can be slid out. So from here we can go ahead and remove it. Take the fans if you can and angle them so you can thread them through the system. Sorry about the noise near the camera. And as you can see, we're going to remove the metal, so we'll remove that temporarily. Pop that over there, and if we have a little look inside, we can see several things. First and foremost, we've got our memory slots there on the bottom, and if we look casually on the other side, right there, we can see our USB. You see what I mean about the space point there? It is not very large at all. So what I'm going to do now is remove this USB like so. Pull it out there. And that is the USB with our Terramaster OS. Once again, I strongly recommend keeping this somewhere safe. In my case, I'm just going to pop that randomly on top there, but I will take care of it, I promise. Then you need to get the USB that we installed the installation software on earlier, and then slot it into that available port. So we'll slot it in there like so. Make sure it's thoroughly in, because otherwise you're going to have to take this whole unit apart again. And as you can see, it's now installed there inside the casing. While I'm here, I'm also going to go ahead and install a memory upgrade inside this system. So I'm just going to do that there. I might fast forward this bit because it will be very dull to watch me desperately try to get my fingers inside this system. So let's fast forward now. Right, so the memory is done. So now we can start putting this back in the chassis. Do make sure you get it the right way round, because I have got that wrong several times in the past. So what we're going to do is get that lined up. And once again, we're going to thread it through the chassis, making sure that we've got it the right way round. So the idea is to have the word Terramaster sitting with the T at the front of the chassis. And you can slide it in quite easily. It should go straight in like so. Okay, so the memory has been installed, so what we need to do now is to put this cage back inside. Do make sure when doing it, if you get lost, that the T is at the front of the device, so make sure you've got it face up with the T of Terramaster where you intend the front of the chassis to be. So thread it in down like that. I apologise for the noise that's going to come through the mic. And then just thread it through like so. Lift it up, and then it should slide in quite neatly. Again, watch your fingers as it goes in, because if you catch it there, you will scream. Once again, I apologise for the noise so close to the microphone. Then from there, you can go ahead and click it into place. Pop it there, slide it round. And it's a question of getting that alignment just right, because the cage is designed to be quite precise around the system. As you can see, it's now gone in all the way around. We can go ahead and get the rear of the chassis back on. Slide it on there, line it all up, and boom, we're clicked into place there, as you can see. So what I'm going to do is get these screws back in here, and again, you can install them all inside. Just grab the right screwdriver there, and once you've done this, we can go ahead and start connecting our other peripherals. Once again, the peripherals that we're going to be utilizing here will depend on your setup. I personally am going to connect the HDMI there in case I encounter any problems. But well, now you've got the USB inside, you should, in theory, have most of the work done. And the KVM setup later on is where things are going to get slightly tricksy. So what I'll do is I'll get all this put inside here, get our last screws in place. And then from there, I think I've missed one, I've missed the middle one. From there, we can go ahead and go with the software. Sorry for the padding in talking, I just want to make sure you guys can see everything that's being done. So now we're ready, we can get our drive media reinstalled. And again, do not be surprised, by the way, when you put the drives back in, if they get a little bit tough to put in, like that. The reason is that this metal chassis is kind of holding everything in place quite tightly. And the minute you take the system apart, it adds an element of kind of wobble, if you will, to the chassis design there. Not a huge amount, but it's enough that I've noticed whenever I've taken the outside of these Terramaster wraparound chassis off, I tend to find that this horrible noise is what happens when you put the drive media back in. It's clearly been wrapped in on a production line level there very, very tightly. But as you can see, as unpleasant as that noise is, it is unavoidable, get ready, because of the way we've now kind of mucked around with the rigidity of that chassis there. So again, now we can get our power reconnected. We can get our LAN reconnected. But what we're also going to be connecting, at least on my side, is our keyboard. And again, you may not need to do this if the boot goes correctly, except for if you are, of course, installing a true NAS system, in which case you are going to need that user interface. So that goes into one of the USBs, as you can see there. Pop that there on the side. And finally, you're going to need your graphical user interface. You're going to need your monitor or a capture card. But once again, I'm using a capture card here, which is then going to go into the rear of this, and my USB here going into my laptop. So what I'm going to do now is boot this system up from my side and go ahead and begin the installation of the software. So let's go ahead and hop over to the screen you're going to see. Okay, so we've moved our way over to the HDMI output, and if I boot the NAS now, like so, we should see the splash screen of the HDMI output, the motherboard BIOS. Now, we're not going to bother going into the full BIOS there, this is just the boot sequence there for the motherboard, but from here it should immediately, as you can see there, read that USB. Now, moving forward, after you've got UnRAID set up for yourself, this system will skip after 4 seconds. So remember, this is via the HDMI port, but you won't need to do this. Now, the one we want to choose is the option at the top, UnRAID OS, and that allows us to interact with the system via the local area network via a client PC. However, if you are connecting to your Terramaster NAS with a true KVM setup, keyboard, video and mouse, then you can select the GUI mode, which will allow you to see the full user interface there via the HDMI output. But for now, I'm going to select UnRAID OS, and then from there, UnRAID is now going to load up and initialize from that USB key there. Now, while it's doing that in the background, what we can do is prepare something else in the background. So if we switch over to the display output and we open up this web browser window here, we can see that I've got the original IP that I set up for this not really doing anything because the system hasn't booted yet. We're just going to leave that up there because we're going to come back to that in just a while. But I'm also going to recommend you download a tool called Advanced IP Scanner. It's completely free and it will allow you to scan your local area network for connected devices. And from there, you'll be able to find your UnRAID server in your Terramaster NAS on the local area network as long as you've got it connected via one of those LAN ports into the network. Now, if we flick back now onto the UnRAID system there via HDMI output, we can see that it has finished booting up OS version 6.10, and there is our IP 192.168.1 and then 113 there at the end. So if we flick back onto the web browser, open up that window there, we can see that the page has refreshed and there is our login window for UnRAID. Now root, you can't change that, that is the super user login. Now we need to create a login password there. I'm going to go for something very simple, and then from there set our password, and now we'll be able to log into our system quite easily. That would be if I actually type the password correctly. And from there, set the password, and now we can log in. And as you can see, this is our interface for UnRAID version 6.10.3. Now, bear in mind, as mentioned earlier on in the video, you will need an UnRAID account in order to take advantage of it. And I will be doing a full review of 6.10 very, very soon as we start to cover UnRAID a lot more on the channel. Now, as you can see, we've got the start trial purchase key. I'm not going to do any of that for now, but do know that you can go ahead with the trial to start creating your storage areas. Or if you choose to, you can just have a little bit of a navigation there in the background. So for example, we can see those two 4TB drives inside. So we can go ahead and select that parity level if we choose. We can go for that, put those drives inside, and there we go. We've got our drives together. And we can start building that RAID if we so see fit. But bear in mind, again, you're going to need that licensing in place, or at least start the trial if you want to make the most of this system, and it will be locked to that individual account that you create. But there are lots of settings and options that we're going to explore in another video. As you can see, one of the drives has got an error that we've been utilizing previously, and it's nice to know that it has picked up that. This drive has been quite busy over the years, so it doesn't surprise me it's starting to show signs of age. But apart from that, this has been how to install UnRAID on a Terramaster NAS. I'm not going to go through the intricacies of UnRAID in this video, but I will be touching on them very, very soon. And last thing, for those of you that are concerned with where the UnRAID installation lives, let me give you an example. I've just given you some idea where it lives. If we shut down the system now, and I'm going to go ahead and shut it down by clicking proceed. From there, on the screen, we're still watching via that HDMI. If we switch over, you can see the system is shutting down. Let's now, from that interface there, I'm going to go ahead and reboot the system from the back there as it shuts itself down slowly but surely. And then what we're going to do is restart the system now. When it restarts, it will load back in, and any settings that we've created ranging from that root directory there, we can go ahead and go right back in to that UnRAID OS there. Bear in mind again, it will kick in automatically if we choose. We'll give the system just a couple of minutes to load in to the user interface of UnRAID, and then we'll flick back over to that web browser there as we wait for the system to fully boot in. And then from there, you'll see that that root password that we created, which is now locked to that USB where the UnRAID kind of default settings live, will be applied. It's not like TrueNAS or some of the other OSs we talked about and used in the past, which require the utilization of more aggressive media inside. You will see benefits in some cases if you use faster media for the UnRAID installation, but for the most part, you can get away with this, at least for experimentation early doors there. And as you can see, it's just loading up all the little blibs and blobs there in the background, and we've gone in, so we can flick back, go back into that USB, and as you can see, we now got to put in that username that we created earlier on. We can go there, we can log in, and as you can see, boom, we're exactly back where we were earlier there. We didn't create any storage areas because we're not having a licensed account, but apart from that, everything is pretty much fine. And that again is UnRAID installed on a Terramaster NAS. If you've got any questions, pop them in the comments. If you want to learn more, click subscribe as we cover this channel, cover this subject and more stuff on UnRAID and Terramaster here on the channel. And click like if you've enjoyed the video because it genuinely helps me. And of course, bigger questions or if you need any advice, take advantage of the free advice section on NAS Compares, linked in the description below. Stay tuned for more UnRAID content coming soon, but apart from that, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.